Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. This morning, I am talking with financial guru Laura Kelly of Tula Books, and she is going to help us get our stuff straight in this new year. Laura, good morning. How are you today?
Doing really well. I'm surprised you said stuff and not shit.
I've only had half a cup of coffee. Work with me, Laura. So,
Yeah,
why
we'll
we'll
get
get
there.
there.
We'll
Trust
get
me,
there.
we'll get there. Why don't you tell the listening audience who you service and what you offer?
Well, so here at Tula Books, we are a monthly bookkeeping agency, if you will. We're growing a team. We're, becoming lean and mean and mighty. So we've got about 5 bookkeepers on our team right now. We service primarily small business, and I know that's like a huge kind of spectrum, but we've got like that burgeoning female entrepreneur who's working her way to 6 figures, but we've also got like our biggest client is a multi-million-dollar e-commerce brand. So we do kind of run the gamut, but I feel like my general rule of thumb is I work with people I like, and I work with people that truly value what we're bringing to the table. And I can usually tell that on the discovery call. So we've got lots of flavors, lots of industries, but we're really doing soup to nuts monthly bookkeeping. So we're managing your books the entire life cycle. We're issuing your financial statements. And then I also have an offering that is a QuickBooks VIP day, and that's more of a done with you service where someone can come in. I can, tweak their QuickBooks and give them basically a QuickBooks SOP manual for them to manage it on their own going forward. So we've
Yeah.
got the done with you and the done for you option.
Which I think is very smart in terms of having a value ladder, because I can totally see
Yes.
someone coming in and kind of doing that VIP day and then being like, "Oh yeah, no, bookkeeping is not for me, Laura. Can you just continue to like do it every month?" Which is probably how I got started in
Yes.
my bookkeeping. No, one of the reasons that I wanted to start this off with who you service is because a lot of people that I have on my podcast tend to lean towards photographers, since that's like my sphere. And I know
Mhm.
you from Done in a Day, putting together
Yep.
VIP days. So I did know that you work not just with photographers, but basically all small business and entrepreneurs, which is why I wanted to get that out of the way. But after you told me
Yes.
that,
Yep.
let's start with the money. Because one of the things that my audience, because I have all kinds of entrepreneurs in my audience, but it does tend to still lean heavily towards photographers. And one of the like hurdles that a photographer has when they are trying to think about outsourcing their books is, number one, they hate their books. They don't want to think about their money at all. Everybody's worried about getting, audited by the IRS. We're going to talk about that too, Laura. But one of the things that I think holds photographers back, and it might not be true of other entrepreneurs, is when we look to outsource things in our business and get time back in our business, bookkeeping doesn't make us money. Bookkeeping is an
Mhm.
overall expense instead of
Yep.
something like outsourcing our editing, which we can actually charge directly to the clients. Like if it's going to cost me $100 to get a session edited, I can just raise my prices $100, and then I'm not paying for the service when I don't use it. So when do people typically come to look to you as like, "Oh my gosh, I'm finally ready to get my books in order?" Like, is it that they've been in business for a certain amount of time, or that they've now crossed this certain financial threshold? Like, what have you seen in the people that are coming to you for bookkeeping?
Well, I really appreciate that question. And I like you taking that angle of the photographers because I've heard your personal story and how you described it was kind of it wasn't a slam dunk decision for you to outsource your bookkeeping because at first you were like, well, is it worth it? Like you said, it's a total overhead cost. So I would say all the folks that come to us, it really runs the gamut. I mean, some of them are just sick of doing it, right? They've been doing it for they're maybe a couple years in and they're like, look, I know I can do this. I just really don't want to do it anymore. So for them, it's just worth it to pay that money to get that off
That was
their
me.
plate. Um, right. Or they could be just like so busy, they truly don't have the time. And now they're 10 months into the year and they haven't done their bookkeeping. That's another reason. Like that's usually a yardstick. It's like, okay, how many months ago did I actually do my bookkeeping? So let's be honest with myself. Am I actually going to do this? No. So I'm going to bring someone in. Sometimes it's revenue levels that dictate it. Sometimes they don't feel comfortable until they are at multiple 6 figures or whatever. But I like I said, I get folks, even, female entrepreneurs that are just approaching that six-figure mark that want to outsource. So I don't even want to say that like it's a hard and fast rule. Once you're at 200K or 300K top line, you should outsource your bookkeeping. It really is a personal decision. And I think bookkeeping, it's a different decision when it comes to outsourcing also because it's so
Mhm.
intimate, you know? You're really letting someone in, and I feel like people think that, "Oh, you're gonna judge me. You're gonna see all the like, oh, I put all these personal charges through my books, or like I spent too much on this." Like people get worried about that, and I'm like, "Honey, trust me. First of all, I've probably seen way worse than you, and second of all, like I can help guide you, and I can help you understand that. First of all, it's all okay, and second of all, if you're looking for more guidance on maybe how to make things better, I can help." So, absolutely no judgment here, but that's usually like kind of like that last hurdle. People are normally nervous about
Yeah,
that.
I joined a mastermind recently. I don't know that I told you this. I've joined a mastermind for 2023 and the price tag was 9K.
Okay.
And one of the thoughts that I
Okay.
had after I paid for it was, "Oh, wow, my
Yeah.
bookkeepers are gonna see
What's my
that."
bookkeeper gonna say?
And I did already get the little note that was like, "Is this education? Question mark, question
Right.
mark, question mark." And granted, they probably meant nothing by the question marks, but I was like, every one of those question marks is judgment.
Right.
I mean, because I also let's just be, totally honest. I joined the mastermind right after one of my lowest months in business in the last 2 years. And so, I mean,
Right.
I didn't necessarily one had nothing to do with the other, but when they send me my monthly, like, "This is your profit and loss statement for the month," it's
You're
gonna
like,
be really
"Lady."
red, y'all. It's gonna be really red, but it's
Yeah.
okay. I'm just gonna get over it. So you said people come when they're just tired of doing it. What are some of the things that you see that people may or may not be doing correctly when they come to you for their bookkeeping? Because I'm assuming that when people come to you for bookkeeping, you're doing some cleaning up of, whatever they've had done for the year, if they've done anything on their own. But what is it that you
Right.
typically see, like a common mistake that people are doing when it comes to doing their bookkeeping on their own?
Oh my gosh. How long is this podcast?
Work as long as you need it to be, but I have a couple of ideas too.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so the first thing I said was, they get tired of doing it, but they're usually tired of doing it because they're running into roadblocks. And they're like things keep coming up that they're like, so let's say they are using QuickBooks. Let's say they've signed on, they've kind of made that jump into more of an automated system. I'll just say it, QuickBooks is not the most straightforward tool on the planet. Okay. And it is meant to be user friendly from the perspective of not being a bookkeeper, but I find that business owners, they almost make it so open and available to do all these things that you really shouldn't be doing. So it's usually just like maybe tossing things into a wrong
Mhm.
category. Like they don't understand that, oh, well, if I put it in this category, this affects my tax deductions. But if I toss it over here, it's not going to show up anywhere that I want it to show up or
Yeah.
something like that. So that's usually an issue, like categorization. Sometimes if you have multiple bank accounts and you're just making transactions where you're just transferring between accounts, that it sounds simple, but it gets so
Mhm.
complicated so fast. And then you start to have duplication. And now you're showing like two deposits in the one account and then you're missing it on the other one. And like so duplication is another issue. Specifically, if you let's say you're using QuickBooks and you're using the automatic bank
Mhm.
feed that comes in. In theory, that's a wonderful thing. It's just going to pull in your bank transactions. But sometimes it might pull it in twice, or maybe you manually key something in and you forgot that it was in the bank. It's a whole thing. So that's the QuickBooks side. On like the Excel manual side, because I'm sure there are folks listening that are still in that boat, and that's fine.
Shouldn't be.
You
Continue.
don't think
Sorry.
so?
No,
Well,
no,
they
there
shouldn't be.
probably
Okay.
are, but they shouldn't be. Continue.
Yeah. I mean, that's where you can really get into trouble because, there is no like automatic feed or connection or no audit point to be able to say, well, what's in my spreadsheet? Does it actually marry up with my bank statement and what actual reality is? So it's so much room for human error because you're manually keying stuff in and oh man. So yeah, it can so many issues. So yes, when we sign on a client, there's usually some level of cleanup engagement that is going along with that, even if they were working with a bookkeeper, because sometimes we have to make sure the balances are right. We have to make sure everything rolls forward right. And sometimes the bookkeeper maybe did things a little
Mhm.
funky. So it lots,
I
lots of
mean, so
ways.
first of all, you talking about people doing their bookkeeping in Excel gave me hives, like literal hives on my arm. Second, when
Yeah.
you started talking about categorization, I think that is one of the things because I mean, I know I have a I love numbers. I mean, I really love numbers. I loved doing my bookkeeping. But the fear of getting audited from the IRS and not making sure that I was categorizing things correctly is what eventually made me hire a bookkeeper. I would get worried that I wasn't being consistent enough. And one of the things that I wasn't doing was, like, for example, education, guys, is not a category on the IRS thing. So if you're making one of
Right.
those, you have to make sure that you're consistent in where you're putting things into your categories. And there was just a point where I felt like, for example, if I bought a template, like if I bought a templated email pack from someone, I couldn't remember how I had categorized the last email templated pack that I bought. And it was really important for me, like, well, no, I need those to be in the same category. So then I started off on QuickBooks Self-Employed, which no one hate me, no one judge me. But one of the things that I discovered really quickly is on that one, you can't make your own categories. So like I wanted to have
Yeah.
all of these
So many
different yeah,
limitations to
I
that.
wanted to have all these
Yeah.
categories so that I could really see where all of my money was going. Like I wanted one for digital templates. I wanted one for like online courses or in-person conferences, and you couldn't do that. So then I moved to QuickBooks, but then or QuickBooks Online, big girl version. But then I just
Yes.
had too
Yes.
many categories. So when my bookkeepers took over, that was one of the many questions that they asked me was, "Okay, you've got all these categories. Like, can we consolidate some of these?" And I was like, "But then how will I know where the stuff goes?" So, I mean, I was
Yeah.
over categorizing things. I want to slightly shift, Laura, because one of the things that I hear as a systems guru all the time, and actually I heard it 2 days ago, which I was like, yes, I'm going to talk to Laura about this because this is, yeah. Someone was talking about their CRM and was basically saying that one of the things that they didn't like about HoneyBook was that they had to manually put their expenses in. And I was absolutely horrified. I was like, "You're using your
Wait,
CRM?
they're using Honey
You're
okay,
using your
all right.
CRM to reconcile," and you can't reconcile. So I will say, guys, just in case anybody's
Right.
listening, if you are a 17 hats user, please ignore what I'm saying because you actually have the capability of reconciling your books inside of your CRM. That is a thing for you.
Oh, they do?
They do,
Oh,
but
wow,
it's
I
not a
didn't
thing
know
for any
that.
other
Fantastic.
CRM. So I'm
No,
talking
no,
to
because it's a bookkeeping activity, it's not a
well, but
CRM
17
activity.
hats will bring in your bank feeds. Like it's
Oh,
a different
that's
kind of
cool.
beast.
Okay,
So for
very
everyone
cool.
not on 17, yes, all of your CRMs have spots for you to put expenses. And I would say that if you're trying to figure out your profit for a project, it's not bad for you to enter an expense. Like if you sold I don't know, $600 in pick time on an album and it costs you 140, you could theoretically take that profit and or the expense and the revenue to get your profit and add it onto the project so that from that client you made, let's say, $1,000 from the session and then you made an additional $600 or 500 and something from the print sale. I'm not objecting to that. But if you are
Yeah,
entering every single expense into your CRM, you are wasting a lot of your time, like a lot of your time. And I can't believe that people are still doing this like now. Because even if you don't want to pay for QuickBooks, there's Wave, which is actually free,
mhm,
up to a certain amount or
yeah,
whatever. But one of the things that I found fascinating, Laura, that you said on one of our mastermind calls, because guys, I'm in a mastermind with Laura, was when you said Stripe doesn't play nicely with QuickBooks. And, like, I swear I
uh-huh.
remember my ears just perked up and I was like, "What?" So, first of all, Laura,
I'm pretty sure you were off video, and then you,
I
like,
flew
flew
back in
into
and I was like,
video.
"What'd
You
you
were
say?"
like
So, let's talk about this because there's the QuickBooks integration, like, as a bookkeeper, there's the QuickBooks integration that you can set up now for almost every CRM where it will feed your revenue into QuickBooks. And then there's also
Mhm,
the choice inside the CRM of what payment processor we should be using. So, first of all, let's talk
yes,
about Stripe. Why does Stripe not
yeah,
play nicely with QuickBooks?
there's no integration. There's no integration. So here's what happens. When you charge a client, let's say you charge them $1,000. We'll make it easy for our numbers here. You charge the client $1,000. You don't get
Correct.
$1,000. You get $970 because you're only getting because Stripe is keeping $30 as a 3%
Mhm.
fee. So the issue is in your books, you want to capture 1,000 and then you want to capture $30 as a fee. Okay. So you have 1,000 up. I'm motioning if you're watching the video portion of this. $1,000 at the top, right? Your top line, your income section, and then $30 is down below in your operating expenses because you want to be able to deduct that. What happens is in your bank feed, you only see 970. So even if you turn on your integration with Dubsado pulls in your invoice of 1,000, which okay, great, but then it won't like reconcile that $970 deposit. So that's still a manual step that you have to do. It will not do that for you. Now, I will say you can do your research. There are third-party integrators between Stripe and QuickBooks. Because if you get off this podcast and you're like, I'm going to prove her wrong, I'm going to look it up. Yes, there are third-party integrators, but there's no native integration. I've tested some of these third parties. They're all right. They all have their limitations, though. So that's where, personally, for me as a bookkeeper, because for me, bookkeeping kind of takes
Mhm.
top billing. No pun intended, actually. Um, like I value ease of bookkeeping over maybe other workflows or efficiencies, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. So for me, I do whatever I can to put my billings through QuickBooks Payments, their own integrated payment processor. And I found ways, Colie, you'll be proud. I've found ways to try and automate it in the Dubsado side of my business as much as possible. Like, let's say generating a payment link from QuickBooks that could be reused and then inserting that into your workflow in Dubsado. So that's how I personally get around it. I do see there are some limitations with some of the automations. I'm sure you will agree because, there's certain automations you can kick off into Dubsado based on when someone
Mhm.
pays. You're not going to get that visibility if they pay in QuickBooks, so I get that. But for me, it's worth it to streamline my bookkeeping over some of those just like slightly manual things that I might have to do in Dubsado, if that makes
And
sense.
see, from my perspective, because I pay a bookkeeper, I'm like, "Oh, they can deal with that."
Hey,
And for me,
basically,
it's more important that when my client pays and they sign they sign the contract and then they pay. It's more important to
yes,
me that the next step in the workflow, so, like, their booking confirmation.
just automatically kicks
Yeah, and
off.
for
Yeah.
myself, it's just an email. But for a lot of my clients that I'm working with, like, there's an actual thing that happens after the clients pay them. Like, it sends them a scheduler to schedule their planning call for their session,
Yeah.
or it sends them a
Yeah.
session guide, or, it does all of these different things. And so to me, that other automation is more important than the bookkeeping. But let's get to that.
Yes.
Because when people come to me for me to set them up on a VIP day and they start talking about bookkeeping, the first thing I say is, I will not do anything with QuickBooks integration. I was like, you are to
Right.
talk to your bookkeeper first. If you have a bookkeeper, you
Mhm.
must talk to them. I want you to ask them if you actually want that, if they actually want you to integrate the QuickBooks from
Right.
Dubsado into QuickBooks. And the reason that I
Yes.
say that is because there are a lot of problems and limitations with the QuickBooks integration. For
There
example,
definitely are.
I was feeling well, I still feel really bad for my bookkeepers, but like I have a membership for my photographers. And so if they're buying into the monthly membership that's $100 a month, I am now charging them the $1,200 upfront. Like that's what their invoice shows. And then they're making
Okay.
monthly payments of $100. But what happens with
Okay.
that initial invoice is when they pay the first $100 payment, it gets synced into QuickBooks. But then the remaining 900 is still showing, or the remaining 1100 is still showing as immediately due because due dates do not
Uh,
transfer from Dubsado to QuickBooks. So
no.
then my
Yeah, because
bookkeepers,
QuickBooks can only have one due
yes.
date. So they can't do all of those installment due dates.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
right.
then they go into QuickBooks and they basically make the due date like at the end of the year so that I'm not constantly showing that my clients are 30 days in arrears, 60 days in arrears, and so on. So I've actually had some clients that were working with bookkeepers that were like, no, don't turn that on. Like I will grab it from the bank feed. We will do other ways, but I would prefer that you not turn
Mhm.
on that integration off. So you Like, do you work with people and you want the integration on? How do you feel about CRM integrations into QuickBooks?
Oh man. Yeah, I've done probably over a dozen QuickBooks VIP days. That's normally when it comes up because it's normally those folks that are opting into my VIP day are photographers or people in the online space, like people that are using a CRM. Not to say that our monthly clients aren't, but we've got
Mhm.
different stratus of people in that bucket. So I really I make it a subjective decision. I can so honestly, sometimes I base it on, do I trust that this person can actually like work with this workflow? Because actually, by bringing it in, yes, you're saving a step, but then you have to kind of add some other steps that they have to
Mhm.
do to reconcile that payment. Like I said, like to make that $1,000 become a $970 deposit. There's a manual step in there. So do I trust my client that they're actually going to follow through on that? And if so, then, I do very detailed documentation for them on all the steps I need to do to like make sure everything goes through. But if I don't feel like they're going to do that path, then I might do more of a shortcut path that is not integrated, but will still capture the $1,000 on the
Mhm.
$30 fee. And then it just kind of makes it a little bit easier. And usually with those, actually, what I do with those clients, I'll just let them like all their straight deposits, it just goes right to income. So even though it's the net
Mhm.
amount, we just capture the income as it all goes along. And then at the end of the month, they can do one true up entry in QuickBooks to grab all the fees. So then all they have to do is log into Stripe one time, run a quick report, and do a quick entry, and then it captures everything. So that's kind of the other approach that I do. But I would say probably in general, I am moving away from getting clients on the integration because there is this kind of manual bookkeeping saying that first of all, people don't really understand what it's actually doing. And if they don't understand it, they're probably not going to latch on to it. And we want to give them a workflow that they're actually going to use. And they're going to like the goal after my VIP day is for them to DIY. Yes, we would love to have them as a monthly client, but they came to me because they wanted to DIY their book. So we want to make that as easy and streamlined for them as possible.
All right. I think we've covered bookkeeping. Let's talk about the other things that you do. So, when you have monthly bookkeeping, I think if I'm remembering correctly, you are giving them kind of like a financial overview, whether it's annually or quarterly or monthly. What are the things that you are looking for when you are giving someone the financial health of their business at one of those intervals?
Yeah. So actually, with all of our monthly clients, they get access to me for a 30-minute debrief call every single month. So that's where they can really, and it's kind of like a fireside chat. It's not real structured. I let them. I liken it to a financial therapy session. If you were my client, Colie, and you came to that call, I would say, well, what's present for you today? I become your therapist, right? What is bothering you? And so that normally guides the call. But let's say the one thing is, you know what, I didn't understand my financial statement that you sent me this one. Okay, great. So let's dive in. So what am I actually looking for when I'm trying to, I think, as you said it, like analyze the financial health of their business? So when I pull up a financial statement, first of all, in QuickBooks, if you have a QuickBooks system, you can very easily do this. I like to track mine month over month over month. So here we are, middle of November when we're recording this. So what I always do is I run year to date through the prior month. So like, let's say at this point, like October's closed, right? Obviously, that's our last full month of
Mhm.
activity. So I would run a profit and loss from January through October. And then I'm looking at the numbers for trends, right? So first of all, income. First thing I look at, right? I'm trying to see, are we growing? Are we shrinking? Did we have a big spike? And I'm trying to understand, okay, well, what happened? What was that big spike? Oh, okay, you launched a new program. Awesome. Or maybe your business is more of a recurring revenue business. There could be some folks on this call that have, like me, where they just keep adding on recurring clients and that piece grows. If it was that sort of business, I would want to see that that's consistently growing. So if it dipped down, again, what happened? Did you lose a client? What happened there? So we're always kind of looking for those types of trends and growth and trying to understand, well, what happened? Then when we go to look at costs, then we look at, again, same thing, right? We want to see like big
Your
look at your
expenses shouldn't be
$9,000
going up and up and up
expenditure.
and up and up.
Yeah, so you're looking at those in relation to each other. So okay, if you had a big income month, maybe you also had a big expense month associated with that. That makes sense. But again, I could see why your bookkeeper might ask you the question, Colie. Maybe you had not the strongest revenue month and
And
you
I spent
you
a lot of
invested that
money. Yeah.
$9,000. Yeah. But not to say that's a bad financial decision though, because that $9,000 is an investment in your future. So again, I wouldn't just look at that on its face and say that was a bad financial decision because you are going to reap the benefits of that over time into the next year. So again, we're looking for trends. The other thing that I like to do with my clients as well, when they have direct costs related to an income that they're
Mhm.
bringing in. So like to your point about you're a photographer, you hire an editor, right? So you want to see for that particular line of revenue that you have photography revenue. You want to look at comparing that top line revenue to the direct expenses related to servicing that revenue and looking at the comparison there and saying, okay, is this still profitable? If you all of a sudden have a ton of costs needed to deliver that revenue, and now your profits are shrinking, but hey, you've also got this monthly membership over here that's very low cost to you, and that's growing. Okay, well, maybe we double down on the membership and we move away from another stream of revenue that you have where there's lots of costs
Mhm.
involved. And I'm just throwing out the examples here. But those are the things that we look at. Profitability of your different types of revenue that you have, expenses in general, making sure that if you're making big investments that, it's being counteracted by the revenue as much as possible, or we know that it's an investment that's going to bring us something in the future. Those are the kind of things that I look at with my clients. And again, maybe they don't even want to look at their financials that month. Maybe they just want to say, "Hey, can I afford to bring on a new so and so person or can I afford to do this?" Or maybe they're trying to get out of debt. So they're like, okay, can we put together maybe a rough plan for me to get out of debt and stuff? So we'll look at cash flow and stuff like that. So it's very open ended. And that's where I feel like back to one of the points you made at the very beginning of this call was you felt like bookkeeping was just an overhead expense. Well, I would argue there can be a return on investment there because you're getting that person. If you say work with a firm like Tula Books, where we are giving you that value add every month, we can help you turn the information that's hiding in your numbers into actionable steps that you can take to grow your
Yes.
business. So I would argue there's an
I
ROI.
wasn't necessarily meaning there wasn't an ROI. It's just not a direct.
Sure,
I
sure.
mean,
It
I
isn't. You're
straddle
right.
both
You're right.
worlds. So I feel like all of
Yeah.
this when we're in the entrepreneurial world of like, VIP days and that I feel like it's a different mindset. It's a total different mindset. And one of the things that I really appreciated when I hired bookkeepers that I wasn't keeping track of. I mean, I love looking at profitability, but I didn't really know what was like standard or acceptable or like what I should be going for. And so I think the first time that I had a quarterly meeting with them, I think it was a quarterly meeting, they were pointing out that, my profitability was hovering, I think it was between 55 and 60%. They were like, it's good. You want to make sure it
Okay.
stays above 50%. And then they were pointing out my cost of goods sold, which is what you were just talking about. Like for
Uh huh.
me, like my editors, they're like, you have a lot of room to play with that because while I have big expenses, which are mostly related to either equipment from photography or like all of the software purchases that I make for the Dubsado side of my business. In terms of photography, I actually don't have very much cost of goods sold. And so they were like,
Right.
that number is way lower than we normally see with most of our photography clients. They're like, as much as you could outsource to get time back, to get, it'll give you a bigger return on investment and you'll be able to get more clients. And I was like, I hadn't thought about it like that. But okay. And so, now I have a photo
There you
editor
go.
and a film editor and a virtual assistant. I mean, like I'm just racking people up.
You're
My
tripped out.
podcast manager. Yeah, I actually haven't looked at my financials since I hired all those people at the end of summer. So we'll see what my numbers are like, in January when I go through them. So you're giving your clients their financial health, you're doing monthly bookkeeping, or you're setting people up for DIY. How many people that hire you for a DIY because they're convinced that they're going to be able to do it themselves? How many people actually make the decision to be like, you know what, Laura? I've just decided this isn't worth my time. Can you just do this for me? Thanks. Appreciate you.
Well, I would say, and it might be a little early to tell because my theory is now I have had a couple people convert out of those like dozen plus that I've done this year. Might be closer to like 15 that I've
Mhm.
done this year. But my theory is that as time goes on and then they see that, you know what? I skipped my bookkeeping this month. I skipped it again next month. Like all of that as it starts to build. I think probably the 3 to 6 month mark
Okay.
after I hold the VIP day with them is probably when I'm going to start to see some folks come back. There were a couple recently that I had actually that they actually went through it knowing they wanted to go right into monthly bookkeeping, which I really liked that because we got really familiar with their books in the VIP day, and then we very nicely
Mhm.
transitioned them to monthly. So we had a couple people that transitioned quite quickly, but for the rest, I would say I'm kind of giving it's a wait and see. So I make sure that I keep in touch
I
with
was about to
them
say
because
that,
I'm
Laura.
like,
See, you stole
how's your
my
bookkeeping
thunder.
going?
I was going to say, as your resident systems person, do you have an email template that you send out at 3 months to ask them how it's going? Okay, you stole my thunder. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Well, I do need to templatize it though. I've been kind of doing it manually, but yeah, there's no
Yeah,
reason
next
why I
time you do
can't
it,
have
just
that
copy
email
it.
set up in
Mhm.
Dubsado. Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I've got a nice workflow for like the 30 days support
Mhm.
period after the VIP day. But yeah, I do need to automate that. But yeah, I just had a gal recently who I did one with her. It was like earlier this year. And I did send one of those like touch point emails, and she scheduled time on my calendar to talk. And I'm like, interesting. Does she want to move to monthly? Like, or does she just have a question? Like, I don't know. We'll
Mhm.
see.
Well, okay,
So
Laura. So this is a question that I ask everyone. Everyone is familiar with the question. Is my favorite part of the interview. I want you to tell
yeah.
me about the biggest fuck up in your business, what you learned from it, and how you grew.
So okay. Let's rewind a little bit because the form that this business has taken in this monthly bookkeeping world, it wasn't like that when I first started. When I first started, I was doing hourly consulting, like CFO level stuff, financial analysis and stuff like that. So I had a pivoting point, but there was kind of a transition from, hey, Laura is an hourly consultant to, oh, Laura's going to team of bookkeepers. Now she's doing monthly bookkeeping and very different type of work. So I would say I took a client, I was kind of straddling that pivot period, and that client ended up consuming my entire life and then consumed a couple of my bookkeepers' lives. And one of them said to me recently that she had PTSD with this client.
I think we've
And
all
I was
been
like,
there.
honey, it's behind us now. It's behind us. But my point in telling this story is that client, because I was still figuring out my business model, I took them on because I needed the revenue, but I knew in my heart that it was going to feel more like an employee relationship than you know, I'm a contractor. I'm setting boundaries. I'm setting my schedule. It was very much like I had multiple meetings with them every week. I was accessible to them every day of the week. Now I was getting compensated for that because we were doing hourly
Mhm.
billing. So we were getting paid for that. It was very lucrative. So when I actually did move away from them, it was painful from a revenue perspective. Um, it hurt in the short term, but I knew that it was the best long term decision for Tula Books because we aren't set up for that. We are set up for predictable monthly bookkeeping that we can do on our own time. You know, we deliver to the clients on time every month in terms of delivering them their financials, but they're not calling us, texting us, or asking for meetings from us because we're just in the background doing the work that they want us to do. And then we're providing the value in the monthly meetings and whatnot. But it's not this sort of relationship where they control fucking life.
I mean, I don't even know what I would email or text my bookkeepers to ask them on a weekly basis. Like every once in a while, if
Right.
I pop in there, I'm just like, oh, this wasn't this category, this was this. And most of the time it's because I tend to have some people who like straddle my business. So I call them unicorn clients. I love you all if you are listening to this podcast because most of them do. I have people that have at some point hired me for photography mentoring, then they're
Okay.
either in my Dubsado course or they hired me for a VIP day, but they are also my photography clients in that I photograph their families. So they straddle
Oh,
both sides
cool.
of my business and they've been, very long
Okay.
term. So every once in a while, my bookkeepers will miscategorize something that they paid me. Like if they paid me for photography,
Yeah.
I see that it's in the education bucket. And I'm like, no, that's like their monthly fee for photography. That's not right. So every once in a while, I send them notes like that, but I just don't even know what I would email them on a weekly basis. Like, I don't know.
Right. Well, we're talking about a different stratus of type of client. Like they were a startup technology company. that it was like we just became part of their team. So it was almost like we were my bookkeeper particular, she was putting in 20 hours a week on this
That's
client.
a
So she
lot.
was practically like a part-time
Mhm.
employee, basically. And then I was sitting on as like a on-call CFO. So that's why I was attending the weekly meetings and all this kind of stuff. There was financial analysis, there was
Mhm.
budgeting, forecasting, total different type of business than what you and I deal with most every other day of the
Okay.
week. But again, it was a prior relationship that I had. It did make sense for me in the short term, but what I learned is like, that's not going to support the growth of Tula Books. That's not scalable. And it also was putting a ton of stress on my
Mhm.
team. You know, it was stressful for them. Like this client used Slack, which we use Slack internally as well. But it was the constant pings and tons of channels and getting tagged in all these places. And my bookkeeper was like, I can't keep this straight. I mean,
There's so many
I'm
pings.
surprised. Yeah, she probably has PTSD with the little Slack, like knock, notification sound. So I kind of feel bad that we're still using Slack, but our internal Slack is way different.
That's okay, Laura. So what you got from that was you learned the trajectory that you wanted your business to go on and what your ideal client was going forward, and that you didn't want to do like that kind of on-demand financial consulting that you had been doing. So, I mean, good on you. So, today we've talked about your offers, which are a VIP day for QuickBooks and also monthly bookkeeping. So, if people want to find out more information about your services, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah. Best place to get in touch with me. I do have a mild Instagram presence. So you can it's more for, static posts that you can learn a lot about just some of my values and how I work with clients and stuff like that. So definitely you can mine my Instagram to kind of learn a little bit more. But if you really want to chat with me in a no pressure situation, I just push people to book a call with me because one of my deeply held values is deep one-to-one connections. I've learned this about myself over the
Mhm.
years, which is actually why I love being a podcast guest because I love being able to go deep with people like you, Colie, and being able to unpack these, topics and things like that. And that's where I really thrive. So if you go to my website, toolbooks.co, there's tons of like big buttons that say book a call.
I am proud of you for your call to actions. Let's just go there.
Yes, yes, there's plenty of calls to action. So, yep, that's my next step. Yes, I have a freebie on my website. Yes, you can download it, but just book a damn call. That's all I can say.
Well, Laura, thank you for joining this morning. It was amazing, as I knew it would be. And everyone, thanks for listening and see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.